All right. Hey, everybody. Whoever is here joining in, we have so much to talk about today. I'm just getting everything ready to go here. Um, all right. As we start things up, I'll just do the obligatory. You could support the Patreon. You could support me by going to patreon.com/Hemant. I appreciate anything you can give. And also, if you want your questions answered in between stories, leave a super chat. We have Den in the comments who is helping out. He'll be using the Friendly Atheist moniker, but he'll sign his name to everything he writes there, and we'll get to any questions in between stories. I figured before I start with the stories I wanted to talk about, I thought I would just give a quick shout out. That's the wrong word for it, but Daniel Dennett died today. He was 82 years old. He was one of the more famous atheists about 15, 20 years ago when all those books were coming out about the new atheism. He didn't come up with that nickname, it was bestowed upon him, but him alongside Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris were kind of in that mix. I would say two things about Daniel Dennett because I haven't followed him for the past few years too much. But if you wanted to read anything by him, the book I would recommend more than any other one would be Breaking the Spell. And that came out around that time. All those other atheist books were coming out. But the reason I like that one, and I did read that one, and I was already an atheist, it didn't change my mind about anything. But I thought if you're looking for a book to convince religious people, not why they should become an atheist so much, but how they should be thinking about questions regarding religion and the thought process involved in that, I found it to be a relatively inoffensive but very useful book in terms of just teaching you how to think logically, think rationally. I liked it. It's the book I've recommended to most people when they're wondering, what should they read if they're curious about religion. And I recommend that a lot more than I recommended The God Delusion or God is Not Great. I just think it's more accessible to people who may not be atheists already. So that's the first thing. The other thing I would recommend that you look up about Dennett if you don't know this already, because I think the most impactful work he did was not the books. He's written like 24 books. It was a project he did, like a research project he did with someone named Linda Lascola, where they spoke to a couple dozen people who stopped believing in God, or at least had very serious doubts about God, but they were pastors. And so they were like, they have a job, their livelihood is mixed in with their religion. And so, what happens if you are a practicing minister, a priest, and you have religious doubts? Who do you talk to about that? You can't tell anyone at work because work is religion. If you tell someone in your life, it's like, I don't believe in God anymore. Yeah, that's nice. Bring home a paycheck. Like you got a job to do. So it's not necessarily something you could tell your partner or your family. And yet they wanted to talk about it somehow. So through like internal networks, it turns out there were a handful of priests who kind of knew each other and they could connect with each other. And they formed what became the Clergy Project, which is kind of like an anonymous online forum where you are vetted. They don't let anyone in the mix. But if you are working at a church or any sort of religious ministry, but you don't believe, but you want to talk about this stuff, and maybe you're looking for a way out, the Clergy Project has been just a one stop shop for that. And Daniel Dennett was like the big name that helped get those people into the fold. He and Linda Lascola talked to those priests. They put out a paper. That paper led to the Clergy Project, which led to more people coming out. I don't know what the number's at now. I don't know how many people are in the forum as we speak. But in terms of an impactful project that still has so much meaning for so many people, that would not have happened without Daniel Dennett. And by the way, the Clergy Project and the interviews that took place with leaders, that became like a Broadway play later on. It became like, I think, a documentary as well. So that's the what I'm gonna miss about Dennett more than anything else. So kudos to him for everything he accomplished. I hope he feels like he led a fulfilled, complete life. He was 82. Sorry to see that news today. Okay, and with that, I'm gonna start with the stories I had in mind to talk about today. The book again was breaking the spell. Thanks, Den. The first story I wanted to talk about with all of you seems to be a story that all of Christian Twitter was talking about all week. I thought this was like a one-day story. No, it has gone on for many, many days. And it involves a Christian men's conference that took place about a week ago. And then it took a bizarre turn. And, it would be enough to just talk about how messed up Christian men's conferences are. But this one in particular was just wild. And let me start by showing you the website for the one we are talking about here. This is here's the website for next year's Stronger Men's Conference. But this is that's the dates for next year. But this is what took place last week. And most of this website has not changed. But I want to show you. Look at this. Who are the speakers? Well, in past years, we've had Mariano Rivera. We've had NFL quarterbacks. We've had UFC Hall of Famers. So, like, they bring in alpha male athletes. Okay. They're not going to bring in Caitlin Clark. Friday night entertainment. What do they have for that? Well, our past conferences have included professional bull riding, motocross and BMX competition, professional boxing, basically anything that involves potential death or injury or beating the crap out of each other. That's what this is all about, because you got to be a real man to be involved in this stuff. I mean, every time I hear about these events, they're always just comically weird because they bring together all these Christian men, and Jesus is the last thing on their minds. It's all like, don't worry, guys, we have monster trucks for you, and here's a cowboy with riding whatever the hell they ride with a lasso, and somehow, I don't know, they're gonna tear apart telephone books, and somehow this is supposed to make you closer to Jesus. And then I assume all the men go back to their hotel rooms and do whatever it is they do with each other. I don't know how it works. I've never been to Christian summer camp. But these events are just comically stupid to begin with, because what the hell do you need to talk about amongst Christian men that you don't want the ladies to hear? But this is what took place last weekend, and of course their opening act was going to be one of these, like, don't worry, we got a real man here who's going to show you some stuff, and then you're going to get pumped up and excited before we bore you with sermons. And so that was the plan. The other thing I got to tell you is that the church that is hosting this particular event is James River Church. It's headquartered in Springfield, Missouri. And if that name sounds familiar, it may be because about a year ago, they went viral for all the wrong reasons, because they were talking about how miracles always happen. And their church, lots of miracles happen at their church. And they rolled like a video clip where they did like man on the street interviews in the lobby of their church. And they're like, has any miracle happened to you? Come talk about it with us. And this lady came up to the microphone and talked about how she had lost 3 of her toes in a horrific like accident, and then they regrew because of prayer. And that was weird. And it's like, oh, do you have proof that your toes regrew? You got some medical records? Do you got some pictures before and after you could share with the crowd? And the answer, of course, was no. Of course, they have no evidence of this, and she's not going to show you her toes. Just believe them. And it was dumb. I would like to say I had a part in making that go viral. And of course, it became viral enough that even mainstream media in Missouri was covering how this church is just lying to people. It was great. Anyway, that's James River Church. These are the people hosting the men conference. And the big entertainment they had on Friday night was this guy named, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Alex Magala. I'm going to show you his website because this this guy is impressive. Check this out. He is the best sword swallower in the world, as proclaimed by America's Got Talent judges. This guy's been on like all the blank Got Talent franchise shows. But look at this thing. Two-time Guinness World Record holder. He's been on 15 Got Talent shows all over the world. He's an aerial sword swallower. Like, he has a big resume. He's very good at whatever it is he does with a sword. You know what I mean? And I'm going to show you like about a minute of the highlight of what he did on opening night of the men's conference. Okay. I'll play it for you. Then we will talk about it. This is Alex Magala at the Christian men's conference, I guess, pumping people up for Jesus somehow. Okay. Jesus. I don't know. Okay, very impressive performance. Just to answer a few questions here. Why was he shirtless? One, because if you had a body like that, you would go everywhere shirtless. But when you're doing sword swallowing, it's really important. You want to show people that when you don't want to be wearing any clothes because you want people to believe the sword is actually going in your mouth. That's not a magic trick. That's something you just got to be trained and know how to do. But you want to show people, no, I'm actually swallowing the sword. I'm showing you my chest. You could see it's not going around me or in a hidden pocket in my shirt somewhere, something like that. So that's why he wasn't wearing a shirt. And then he did this very impressive fall from the top of a pole. And like, all right, I don't know what that has to do with anything biblical. But okay, if that's your thing, that's your thing. Okay, fine. If you think that has nothing to do with Jesus, you are correct, but and neither do bull riders or BMX bikers or wrestlers or any NFL quarterback, but those are all staples at these kinds of events. The goal is to just pump up the crowd with testosterone that they sprinkle everywhere somehow. So that was like night one of the conference. And then this is the more surprising thing because, like, the next day, it seems, they made the mistake of inviting a guy named Mark Driscoll. And if you're not familiar with Mark Driscoll, first of all, lucky you. Second, there was a podcast that was produced by Christianity Today that talked about all the problems with Mark Driscoll. I think it's worth checking out if you haven't heard it before. I will show you one article. This is Mark Driscoll in a nutshell. This is from HuffPost, and this is from 2014. But basically, Mark Driscoll was a very famous Christian pastor, I think outside of Seattle. And then his whole little empire came crumbling down because basically enough people started saying this guy is spiritually abusive to them. Mark Driscoll would like have an anonymous troll account he would use online. And using that troll account, he called women like penis homes. That's what they're good for, according to Mark Driscoll. He said horrible things in a book about how perfect his marriage is between he and his wife. But, you know, he found out that she had had sex before they were married and it ruined her for him. Like, he says and believes a lot of horrible, horrible things. He's abusive to a lot of people, not physically abusive, but just you don't want to be around this guy. He spends his life making you feel bad about your life. So this church, Mars Hill, they kicked him out of the church. And then he spent like 2 minutes being like, I'm going to reform. And then he just packed his bags, moved a few hours away to a different state, set up a church there. And that's what he's been doing ever since. Just a horrible, horrible person. Why the hell would you invite Mark Driscoll to your Christian conference? Why do you think Christian men need to be more like Mark Driscoll? Where's Andrew Tate? You might as well invite him at this point. So they made a mistake of inviting Mark Driscoll to this Christian conference. And I'm going to now play for you a little bit of what Mark Driscoll said at this conference, because that's where the problems really began. Okay. And the thing is, I'm going to summarize this before I play it for you. He basically says, I want to preach to you, but I got to tell you about that thing that happened last night with that sword swallower. Because with Mark Driscoll, if someone swallows a sword, he can't get that imagery out of his mind. Let me play for you what Mark Driscoll said, then we'll talk about it.
I've been up since 1 o'clock in the morning. The reason I'm hoarse is I have been praying for you, and my heart is very burdened for you. And I want to be very careful with this, and it's not what I want to say, but the Jezebel spirit has already been here. The Jezebel spirit opened our event. This is a rebuke and a correction of no one. This is an observation. Before the Word of God was open, there was a platform. It was a high place. On it was a pole, an ashtray. The same thing that's used in the strip club for women who have the Jezebel spirit to seduce men. In front of that was a man who ripped his shirt off like a woman does in front of a pole at a strip club. That man then ascended. See, our God is not arrogant. He doesn't ascend. Our God is humble. He descends. And then he swallowed a sword, and Jesus cried, okay, Pastor John, I'll receive that. Thank you.
Why would you invite Mark Driscoll to your conference? Like, of course he's going to make this about him. He's going to be like, that thing you saw, it was blasphemous. Just listen to me. I'm the only holy one here. In case you missed anything he said, just to recap, what he said was that the death-defying feat that everyone saw earlier was actually anti-Christian because it involved a strip club-like pole, which was not used for stripping, and a man who removed his shirt, even though that wasn't sexual in nature. And then he climbed a pole, and how dare he? Because God doesn't go up, God comes down, which is weird because heaven is about going up, and why would God? Okay, anyway. But this guy climbs up the pole, even though the guy came back down. He's mad about it. Mark Driscoll is mad about it because Mark Driscoll is always mad about whatever it is. And I saw someone comment about this. Is he mad about the sword swallowing? Did he find that a little too much? No, that wasn't even the issue. Every guy at that conference totally fine with that. It was the sexualization of it. I don't know what he's mad about. Driscoll said this was evidence of the Jezebel spirit infesting the conference. And the thing is, he says ridiculous stuff all the time. This is just the latest example of it. The irony is he could have criticized so much that was happening at this conference. He could have said that performance was a waste of money. He could have said that performance does not bring us closer to Jesus. And by the way, neither did the monster truck rally they held the year before. He could have said the Bible gives you all the entertainment you need to get excited about Jesus. He could have condemned the other poor decisions at this conference, like who the hell invited someone like me at this conference? You could have criticized that, Mark, but you didn't. Instead, he went with like homoerotic imagery that resembles lady strippers. And the truth is, the men in the crowd would have been better off watching actual strippers than listening to Mark Driscoll. But because Mark Driscoll actually poses a long-term threat to their mental health. But the performer, that guy was harmless. He was hired to do a stage show, and he did it. It seemed to go really well. Everyone was gasping and awing and clapping and like calling that anti-Christian because Mark Driscoll sees sex everywhere he goes. That's a Mark Driscoll problem. That is not everyone else's problem, okay? And then finding a way to blame women somehow for everything that just happened, that is very much a Mark Driscoll thing to do. But at the end of what he said there, maybe you heard someone yelling at him from off stage. That was the pastor of this church, John Lindell, who's yelling from the audience something like, "You're out of line, Mark. You're done." And then Driscoll scampered off stage. Lindell then took the stage himself to calm down the angry mob that's in the audience. And he basically said two things. I'm going to play a little bit of this for you too. He said, one, if Mark Driscoll actually had a problem with the performer, there were plenty of opportunities where Mark Driscoll could have said something to him, but he did not. That's the main thing this pastor says. Let me play you what Pastor John Lindell said.
If Mark wanted to say that, he should have said it to me first. He didn't. Matthew 18. If your brother offends you, go to him privately. I talked to Mark for a half hour. There was not one word of that. He's out of line. If he wanted to say it, he could say it to me. You may not agree with me. You may not agree with him. But we are brothers in Christ, and there's a right way to handle disagreement.
There is no better sound than a pastor getting booed at a Christian guy who was mad at the guy who swallowed a sword. This is so dumb. Okay, that whole exchange is just the epitome of a Christian men's conference, because you have one asshole delivering a diatribe against a performance that he doesn't seem to understand but insists he's an expert about. That's Mark Driscoll. Then you have another asshole shouting at him off stage before claiming the real concern is that all disagreements ought to be raised in private, while never apologizing for inviting asshole one to the event in the first place. Like, that's the love of Jesus right there. By the way, for what it's worth, the idea that all disputes ought to be handled privately, I get why you could handle this one privately if you had a problem with it. But in general, that is not good advice, especially coming from a Christian pastor, because that makes it far too easy for real problems, not the Mark Driscoll problems, but like real problems to be swept under the rug. Do you know why we've been having like a national conversation about sexual abuse in the Catholic Church and Southern Baptist churches and all that? It's because the people who wanted to handle disagreements privately lost the fight, and a lot of victims decided to go public with things they were having concerns about, and that's why anything actually happened. So, and by the way, that's also true for Mark Driscoll's spiritual abuse. If anyone had a problem, he told them you should handle it privately, but at some point they realized, no, we got to go public with this. And that's why Mark Driscoll was kicked out of Mars Hill too. So like, no, you don't have to handle everything privately. But in any case, this is the argument that they had. The two men later on in the men's conference, I guess they had a conversation on stage that was supposed to be some version of reconciliation. But apparently that's not what happened either, because this is what has happened since then. This is an article from today. This is from the Christian Post. Pastor John Lindell claims Mark Driscoll tried to divide his church and family, urges him to repent. So apparently after the conference happened, I'm going to show you a couple things here. Look at this. Lindell also alleged that Driscoll accused his son Brandon of a list of dark sins, urged another son, David, to take control of the church and separate himself from his father and brother. Let's get into some more details here. Oh my God, this family. This is what John Lindell said to Mark Driscoll. We are calling you to publicly repent for refusing to stop the spread of lies regarding Alex Magala, a Christian brother. Mark, we are calling you to publicly repent for sowing disunity in the body of Christ, which, by the way, is what Mark Driscoll has always done. This is not new information. Mark, we are calling you to publicly repent for covertly trying to divide brothers and making false and slanderous accusations against Brandon Lindell. Mark, we are calling you to publicly repent for trying to create division in the Lindell family, all the while saying you love us. Like, buddy, maybe you should handle this privately. Have you ever thought about that? What the hell happened since the conference? Well, apparently, after all this stuff went down, Here it is. Oh, I love this too. Mark could have easily contacted one of his own congregants to find out more about Alex, or even contacted Alex's manager, but it seems that Mark is more interested in the controversy that will sell books, gain clicks, and increase donations to his ministry, Lindell said. That is true. The thing about it is, everyone's been saying that for over 10 years. Lindell's just the last guy to figure this out. That's like someone saying, I might vote for Donald Trump. He seems fine. Like, buddy, everyone else is way ahead of you and you are making a mistake. It's your fault for not figuring that out. But this is what happened. This is amazing. He then explained what happened after that event last weekend. After I stopped Mark's message and calmed the crowd, I ran backstage to find Mark and was told that he had left for the airport. I ran into the parking area and Mark got out of the car, and as he came up to me, he said, well, that didn't go very well. To which I responded, Mark, you were out of line. And he said, no, I don't think so. Stupid people. Okay, this goes on. What else happened here? I thought I highlighted one other thing. Maybe I did not. Apparently, he calls up the family. Where did this go? Oh, I want to find. Here we go. Lindell explained that the story took a strange turn on Saturday night when Driscoll started sending John Lindell's son David a series of texts regarding Magala and said that his team had created a file that reflects behavior that's completely demonic. In total, Mark sent 8 texts to John Lindell's son, stopping at 12:30 a.m. on Sunday morning. I texted Mark the following at 1:48 p.m. Mark, I wanted to respond, blah, 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 telling him that the sword swallower's Christian, as if that matters. It is a Chinese acrobat pole. The Chinese pole dates back to the 12th century. They're having an argument about the damn pole. Who cares? Nobody cares. That's not the issue. What did Mark Driscoll say about the sun? On Sunday evening at 7:43, Mark texted, Pastor John, thank you for your response. I love you and your family as well. My plan is to be saying and doing nothing but praying. Blah, 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 blah. Mark Driscoll's like, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. And then, oh my God, Lindell says Driscoll also called his son David and left him a voicemail Saturday night. He also called him on Monday, but didn't leave a message. But he said, call me back. And then the guy called him back. And then Driscoll told John Lindell's son, David, there's something wrong at James River Church. Among other things, Driscoll raised concern about a mixture of the sinful and the sacred. Driscoll urged David Lindell to separate himself from his father and brother Brandon, who he allegedly described as a broken man. He went on to accuse Brandon of a list of dark sins. Listen, I don't know what the hell is going on, but I love that Mark Driscoll, uninvited, is just barging into this entire family, turning them against one another, which is spiritual abuse, and saying, like, separate yourself from your father and your brother, take over the church. The church is demonic. Why? Strip clubs and a pole that were not even strip clubs and a pole. I don't know. What the hell are they doing? These people are idiots. And again, this is John Lindell's fault, because if you're running a Christian men's conference, 1, you don't invite Mark Driscoll, for 1, and 2, you don't hold the conference. It's a dumb idea. Next year, here's what they should do for the Christian men's conference. Go to the website, add a little banner that says canceled, and then be done with it, and just go back to your safe space where everyone can just brag about how their limbs are growing back and everything will be fine, okay? That's what you do. One final note, and then I'm done with this, which is that, you know what else they did at this Christian men's conference? They spent several hours packing meals for the needy, the poor, the hungry. Wait, no, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong website. That was American Atheists. That was at their conference. They did not spend time watching monster trucks and a sword swallower. They were actually packing thousands of packages of food. How many? 24,000 meals for Philadelphians in need. The tradition is an homage to founder Madalyn Murray O'Hair's quotation that 2 hands working can do more than 1,000 clasped in prayer. Huh. Maybe they should try that at a Christian event in the future. Okay. I'm done talking about Mark Driscoll. Can you see how I had to talk about Mark Driscoll? There's nothing else more important going on this week, obviously. Let's take some questions, 10, before I move on to a different thing altogether. Is the pole supposed to be emblematic of an Asherah pole or something? That is what Mark Driscoll said. Don't ask me what the symbolism of an Asherah pole is. But again, if you're confusing something that is just a pole so he could do his trick with something that is meant to be biblical, like, they're not the same. It's just a tall cylinder. Get over yourself. You know what I mean? But that is what they were trying to compare it to. You didn't show the part where Mark ran off stage. Maybe either I cut it off the video too soon, or I didn't have a good video of it. But yeah, he scampered off stage right there at the end, which is hilarious. That's just evangelical Christianity for you. You're always mad about something. And the thing is about evangelical Christians is they have very little to be mad about. They control everything. They own the government. Like evangelical Christians, pretty much there's no other group they would actually want to trade places with, no matter how much they complain about it. But they always have to play victim. That is what Christian nationalism is all about, saying, you guys, we're losing something, so we got to overcompensate and put Christianity everywhere. I wonder what the sword Jezebel's opinion was on the matter. Yeah, wasn't Jezebel in the Bible eaten up and like tortured, something like that? Alex Magala has said basically he has issued some statements in response to this whole controversy, but they more or less boil down to don't be mad at me. I think he might be a Christian, born again, but like he didn't do anything. He wasn't stripping. He tried to make that point, but again, normal people already knew that. He said, I was just performing a thing. Look at my resume. I've been doing this for years. I'm really good at it, which is also true. And again, anyone looking at the situation would know that. So I feel kind of bad that he got stuck in this, but also, dude, you took the invite to go perform at a Christian men's conference. So of course you're going to get trapped in this. These dark sins. I want to know more. I do too. And why would Mark Driscoll know about the dark sins of another pastor's son? I don't know. Are they on covenant eyes together? What's the deal? I have no clue. But Mark Driscoll knows all about everyone else's sins, apparently. Oh, thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate that, Mrs. Nesbitt. My dismal baptismal. Love it. Thank you, Hamster, for that super sticker as well. All right. I'm going to move on to a different story here. Let's talk about, let's talk about Madison, Wisconsin, because Madison, Wisconsin is in Dane County, Wisconsin. And earlier this month, the Dane County Board, like the elected officials who run the county, they had a meeting, and I want to show you a proposal they were considering here. Check this out. This is a proposal to give a $231,000 grant to a group called Porchlight for calendar year 2024. What is Porchlight? Porchlight is basically a nonprofit organization that works to help the homeless. They provide them with shelters and food and access to telehealth and a lot more. And this is a way to deal with unhoused people in the community. I mean, that's wonderful. That's the sort of thing you want your local community to be assisting with. And they have a nonprofit group that seems to be doing a really good job of it. So they considered and voted to give this large grant to a group called Porchlight. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, there are like 24 members of the Dane County Board, and the proposal to give the money to Porchlight passed almost unanimously. Everyone voted for it except for one dude. And that one dude's name is Jeff Wygand. And he got up and he basically said, my problem is not that Porchlight is assisting the homeless. That's all well and good. But they're putting a bandage on the situation. They're taking care of like the end of the line, we need to be dealing with the root cause of homelessness. And unfortunately, I think it's a waste of money, Jeff Wigand said, if we're not using our resources to address the root causes of homelessness. That's what we ought to be doing. That's why he decided to vote against this proposal. He said, for every dollar that we invest in providing someone a temporary place to sleep, we ought to be investing an equal amount or putting an equal amount of energy towards finding solutions toward the root cause. Which, okay, I guess that makes sense. But also, you still got to deal with what's happening in the here and now. Like, you can't always go back in time to figure out what the root cause is and solve that. But anyway, after he says this and goes around in circles for a while, another member of the county board, his name is Anthony Gray, he gets up and he basically says, why are you, I'm paraphrasing, he's like, why are you beating around the bush here? What do you think is the root cause of homelessness that we ought to be tackling instead? And Wigand gets back up, and you knew he was ready for this question, because I'm going to show you video. He has this big ass smile on his face, like he's been preparing for this moment his entire life. And I'm going to show you what he says. So again, this is what Jeff Wigand says is the root cause of homelessness.
Since you asked, you'll get an answer.
Thank you.
Sin is the root cause. Please record it. Please record it. It is being recorded. Thank you. Sin is the root cause. When God created this world, there was no sin. He created a perfect world. Man ruined that by sinning. And we've seen the depravity and the decline of our world ever since then. So when we talk about the root cause, if you really want to go back to why we have mental health issues, to why we have greed, to why we have people being mean to other people, it's sin. And until we address that issue, we're going to continue to see this issue of homelessness and a whole slate of other issues in our society. So thank you for asking the question.
I'm sorry if the volume was low on that, but basically you heard what he said. He said sin is the problem that we need to tackle if we actually want to solve homelessness. It's not just a pointless answer. That is a completely impractical answer. And by the way, I can't go back and pause it, but you should, if you get a chance to go back and see that video, the lady sitting right behind Jeff Wigand had this look on her face after he sat down of like, what the hell are you talking about? But okay, going back to his message there, let's take a second to consider what if he's right. Even if you believe in the biblical story, there's literally no way to resolve the issue. What are you going to do to fix sin? What are you going to do? Go back in a time machine and force Eve to uneat a piece of fruit? Like, what does he want? Presumably, Wigand wants taxpayer dollars spent on converting people to Christianity rather than helping them with any of their pressing needs. Not only would that be illegal, the board would be turning its back on the people in their community who actually need help, which is like the one job they were all elected to do. So that's dumb to begin with. But let's say they did put money toward fixing sin. What should they do in the meantime when it comes to assisting people with mental health struggles or homelessness or being mean, whatever he said there? Like, nothing if people like Wigand had his way, because they've done enough. They're addressing the root cause. Is a switch going to magically flip on after 1 week of the sin initiative and solve all the problems? No, of course not. The most Christian states in America, check this out. The most Christian states in America are also the ones, you could see the list there. Alabama has the most Christians, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Dakota, Tennessee. These are all states that have among the highest gun death rates, the worst health care, the least formal education. I mean, more Jesus has never been a good solution to anything. And then Wigand is also making this crass and misguided assumption that the unhoused people who could benefit from Porchlight's generosity are struggling because of sin, as if they brought this upon themselves. Because the sad truth about homelessness is that it's almost never the result of a personal failure. It's the result of larger systemic problems. Like, what's the reason people are homeless? It's because they don't have homes. So maybe we should invest in affordable housing. Maybe we should make sure they have a mental health care access to that. Maybe we should give them a place to go while they are struggling to recover and get back on their feet. Like, at the local level, giving a grant to a nonprofit group that helps the homeless, that is a really important way to address the concerns. Building affordable housing, making sure social workers are available for them, that's another way you could help the homeless. But elected officials have an obligation to use the resources they have to help the people who need it. They should be basing their decisions on data. For a county supervisor to pretend that a lack of religion, his religion, is the biggest problem everyone faces is basically an admission that this guy has no business in elected office. He should be wasting a church's time, not wasting a seat that could go to someone who actually cares about the people in Dane County. So there's a local news site, Madison 365, and they followed up with Wygand about all this. They basically asked him, hey, explain yourself. Like, what does your church do to help people, to help the poor and the hungry and the needy? And here's what he told them. He cited his own church, which he said offers food, clothing, and housing assistance, as well as mentorship and counseling. That's very nice. He declined to name the church, which is interesting because now no one can go and follow up and see if they actually do this shit. That's the model I think works the best, because the church individuals, people one-on-one, can determine the difference between someone that wants to continue to make poor decisions and someone that doesn't, someone that truly wants to turn their life around. I'm going to stop there for a second. What's the implication of that line? He is saying there are some people that want to get help, by which he means they want Jesus. They're willing to say that. And other people who apparently, if you don't want to play along with his religious cosplay or whatever, you just don't want help. You just want to be homeless. It's your fault now. Like, it's so disgusting what he's saying. Then he goes on to say, he said, no one the church helps has to believe in God. They'll help anybody, but they do have to attend a Bible study. If we're going to physically give you help, we're going to do a Bible study with you. You don't have to believe it. You can sit there and check the box, but we are going to, because we believe that's the true solution. We're also not going to turn someone away if they have a physical need. If you have a physical need, come on in. We just ask you to sit through this Bible study. If you don't want to listen, that's fine. Oh my God. So if there was someone who was starving, someone who is freezing, needs a place to go, Madison, Wisconsin gets cold. And if they need help and they went to this guy's church, the church would say, okay, fine, we would love to help you. Just come to the Bible study. And if you're like, don't give a shit about the Bible, just need food or warmth, they would say, oh, too bad for you. Go away. That's how his church operates, because apparently they're the moral ones here. Like, absolutely a disgusting way that church operates. That's pathetic. It's spiritual coercion. Like, look, if people don't want to waste their time in Bible study, you should still help them. Wygand and his church say, we won't help those people. Forget them. We would rather have them lie to us and say, yeah, I went through Bible study and just had my, I don't know, earpods. They don't have earpods. But like, I sat through it and it was great. Now give me food. They would rather be lied to that way than just have someone say, I'm not religious, or I'm not your religion. Can you just help me? They don't want to help that person. Like, these people are horrible. So I mentioned that there was another supervisor, Anthony Gray, the guy who's like, why are you beating around the bush? Tell us what you mean by the root cause of sin. The newspaper also asked that guy, hey, what do you think about the answer you got? And check out what Anthony Gray said after that. Here's his response. It wasn't until the fourth or fifth time that it dawned on me what he was actually saying, Gray said. Once I figured it out, I realized how vile and disgusting it was to blame homelessness on the unhoused. I knew that if I opened the door for him, he would stop talking in dog whistles and speak truth. Like, beautiful. The guy knew exactly how to get Wygand to say something dumb. Gray, who calls himself a practicing Episcopalian, said he disagrees with Wygand's view of both sin and the causes of homelessness. The reason people are homeless is because they don't have homes, he said. The reason people have mental illness is because they are sick. Blaming the victim is the coward's way out. I love that guy. He's amazing. And that's spot on. The newspaper also spoke to Dana Pelabon, who is another supervisor there, who also said Wygand's remarks contain a racial element to them, which is also true because she said many of the unhoused people in Dane County are Black. And if you want to talk about root causes for homelessness and racism, it would not be hard to find a religious component there either. And here's what she said. We know homelessness disproportionately affects Black people. If he really wants to talk about the root causes, if he wants to talk about sin, then he needs to go back in history and look at the root causes of how it is that Black folks are treated and the sins that were perpetrated against us. Like, damn. Yes, absolutely right. Like, you can't talk about homelessness and why people live in poverty and all of that without talking about like racism and mental health and the lack of care we give people with mental health issues and all of that. The fact is, if Wygand got what he wanted on the Dane County board, people who are suffering in their community would continue to suffer. All while he smirks with his shit-eating grin at their misery, just like Jesus taught him to do, apparently. Like, the good news here is that everyone else beside him on that board, they had a heart, and they voted to do the right thing, and they voted in favor of the grant. But by the way, it's not the first time this has happened, apparently. Jeff Wygand, last year, I should say, Dane County officials voted to make their county a sanctuary for trans and non-binary people. Wygand was the only supervisor to vote against that as well. And I should say, I don't want to knock all religious people here either, because after he said his stupid comment, a bunch of religious leaders in the community wrote an open letter that was also published in the newspaper. And I want to show you this little bit of what they said as well. This is from like a couple dozen religious leaders in the community. Supervisor Wygand, we write to you to call on you to be more careful with your words concerning the communities oppressed and marginalized. It has come to our collective attention that you indicated in your official capacity that sin is the root cause of homelessness. Not only is this statement deeply hurtful and divisive in our community, it is simply wrong and certainly contradicts the teachings of Jesus Christ. And they go on to say, Jesus did not see unhoused people as sinful and problematic. Rather, he continually characterizes theologies like yours that infer that only bad and sinful people are unhoused as problematic. And just check out all these people signing their name. They're all pastors, ministers at local churches. Good for them. I really appreciate the fact that they're speaking out against this guy. I do want to say one last thing about this, which is Jeff Wygand, the guy you just saw, he just won re-election earlier this month. In a local election to keep his seat on the board, he just fended off a challenger. There's our buddy right there. Where did he go? Right there. There he is. He just won that seat. And I was trying to wonder, like, how many votes did he win by? Check this out, because on the local election that took place earlier this month, it was 2 people on the ballot for his seat. April 2nd, 2024 was the election. And look at these numbers. Jeff Wygand won with 1,576 votes. His challenger had 1,420. That is a difference of 156 votes. That's how much this guy won by. And in 2022, when he was running for the first time officially, look at this. 1,231 to 1,198. He won by 33 votes the first time he ran for office. Which is to say, like, the thing about elections in general is most people are apathetic. They don't pay attention. They really don't pay attention to local races. you have to imagine it should not have been that hard. If people actually knew how messed up this guy was, it should not be hard to unseat him. And again, I'm not blaming his opponents. I'm sure they did all they could. But these races, local races, are won and lost by sometimes hundreds of votes, if that. They are winnable races for whichever side can get out their side. Like, my goodness, I hope that happens in November and like the people on the progressive side are not sitting home because of whatever they're mad about. You have to get out and vote because that's the sort of thing that pisses me off more than anything. Uh, I know this is just one voice on a board full of dozens of people, but again, there were other people that anyone would be better than this guy, but he got the handful of votes more that he needed. I think it's every 2 years you get elected to this board. I could be wrong about that. But there you go. Don't vote for Christian nationalists at any level, or you're going to end up with faith-based buffoons making decisions that affect everyone. And they have shown repeatedly at the local level, at the federal level, they are incapable of handling that responsibility. Okay. Going to pause there for a bit. Thanks for that donation. As a social worker and mental health professional for the state of Washington, people like this make me absolutely sick. I believe you. I'm right there with you. I'm sure social workers who work with people who are unhoused understand a lot more about the root causes of homelessness, and mental health professionals as well. I imagine people who are religious but actually wise about this stuff and well versed in these issues, they would be saying the same thing. It's disgusting to see what guys like our friend over here, Wygan, says. So thank you for doing what you do. God couldn't even deal with sin, and now you want the government to solve it? Oh, brother. Yeah, if sin is a problem, I mean, go pray for that to be fixed. You don't need a grant for that. In the meantime, use the grant to help people. Why is he against that? Because he's not a good person. What else we got? That was the point of the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? The people beat that guy and left him on the road because he was a sinner. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure if I know the Good Samaritan story, it stops right there and nothing else happens. No one helps him. They beat up sinners and leave them there. That's the story of the Bible. Nothing else comes of it. Although it's not always the case, a good majority of homelessness has some kind of underlying mental health issue that's not being adequately addressed. I mean, yes, exactly. And that's why you want local officials, city officials, county officials to do what they can to make sure mental health care is available to people who need it, and it's not going to bankrupt them. And that if they are unhoused, you want to help get the unhoused off the street, give them a safe place to go and stay so that they can get back up on their feet. Not all Christian faiths are equal. I get assistance from one, and they have not preached to me once. I can only afford housing because of them. Well, thank you for sharing that. And yes, you are absolutely right. That guy's church that said, yeah, we'll help you, but only if you sit through Bible study, which is a horrible thing to say or do. That is not what a lot of religious ministries do. They will say, no, we are here to help you. We're not asking you questions. You don't have to profess your faith to us. You don't have to come for a service or anything like that. We're going to do what we have to do because that's what our God commands us to do. Like, you know what? Disagree with you on the religion thing, but fine, go do that. That's the way to do it. So yes, thank you for pointing that out. How long is the seat held for? Zoe, I think it's 2 years. At least that's what I could tell from the election pages. But 2 years at least. People can vote this guy out. I hope they do. I'm 100% sure people like Trump trying to deny black people's rights has absolutely nothing to do with that. Are you saying that guys like Jeff Wigand are basically taking a page from Trump because of not so subtle racist beliefs? It's possible. I think guys like Jeff Wigand, they don't consider themselves racist, but then when you see how they act and what they do, they are. Like, you don't need to wear the white hood to be racist. You know what I mean? And there are a lot of people that mistakenly think unless you actually come out and say racist stuff, you can't be racist. And guys like Wigand show, no, you just don't get it. You are racist, but you can't see it because you're not looking deep enough. You know what I mean? So yes. Mark Driscoll being a troll, not surprised. Thanks for that donation. And yeah, he always is, isn't he? Okay. I am going to go on to the next story. This is like a two-parter here. Give me 1 second to pull up some stuff here and close 900 tabs. Almost. Okay. Oh, that feels better already. Okay. This is amazing. One of the leaders of a Christian nationalist group that is trying to put religious chaplains in public schools, he has come out publicly to say that Satanists and presumably other non-theistic groups are not allowed to participate in these chaplaincy programs because if you don't believe in his God, you don't qualify as a real religion. And he's kind of expanded his thinking to say, like, well, if you don't believe in God, maybe not my God, but God, then you don't qualify. And here's the thing. I will explain all of this to you because it made news again today. But if you're not aware, there is a push to get chaplains in public schools. You know, for years, Christian nationalists have tried to get the 10 Commandments in schools. They've tried to get the Bible in school. They've tried to get forced prayer back in school. Now they are trying to get Christian chaplains in public schools. And in a place like Texas, not only do they want chaplains in schools, they have passed a law saying school districts could actually replace social workers and counselors and people who actually know what they're doing with chaplains. Like, it's just a horrible, horrible idea. 14 states, at least 14, including Texas, Florida, and Kansas, have either proposed or passed legislation now to give public schools permission to hire chaplains on their staffs. Either you're paying them or they're voluntary, but they can be there. And supporters of these ideas, they say it's a way to address staffing shortages and improve mental health for students. Opponents, the people who are right, argue that students deserve qualified experts, not some random schmo off the street with questionable credentials who clearly want to proselytize. And like some Republicans have openly said, like The Secret, which is like a very open secret, they've said, yeah, we're totally doing this to tear down the wall between church and state. Here's the sponsor of the Texas bill that was passed. He's a state senator, Mays Middleton. This is what he said back a year ago. This week, the Senate passed a bill to put chaplains in our public schools. The bill will allow the important role chaplains serve for pastoral care and represent God's presence within our public schools. Like, he's not even hiding it. Their goal is to shove their religion in public school. So recently, for example, in Oklahoma, they passed a bill that would not even require background checks on these chaplains. You don't have to have any qualifications. It allows chaplains to proselytize. That's out of committee. They haven't passed it into law yet, but that's happened. And the other thing to point out, just like you saw in the last story, is that sometimes religious chaplains are the ones speaking out against this. This is a letter last year sent to all Texas school board members, August 22nd, 2023. You could see here. And look at this. These are religious chaplains signing on to this letter. Because of our training and experience, we know that chaplains are not a replacement for school counselors or safety measures in our public schools. And we urge you to reject this flawed policy option. It is harmful to our public schools and the students and families they serve. And I'm just going to scroll down so you could see this letter is signed by so many chaplains representing many different denominations and everything. And this goes on for a while. Like, a lot of people signed this open letter. So a lot of good people are trying to push against this because they know it's a bad idea. And just to point out one other thing, in Texas, they are dismissing trained professionals to bring on these chaplains. A Houston Chronicle report, I want to tell you, in 2022 noted that Texas public schools that serve 98% of students did not meet the Texas Education Agency's recommendation of one counselor per 250 students. In other words, they don't have enough counselors to begin with, and now they're getting rid of the ones they have and replacing them with cheap alternatives that are not nearly as good. What is that all about? And by the way, Texas had a budget surplus of $32.7 billion with a B dollars. They have the resources to hire mental health professionals or invest in people becoming mental health professionals, and they're not doing that because it's Texas and it's run by Republicans. So this is the issue we've been dealing with now for like over a year. Even if the chaplains were prohibited from evangelizing in schools to students, their very presence sends the message that Christianity alone is a solution to your problems. It is not. If it works for you, fine, but it's not a solution for everybody. The entire assumption that chaplains are beneficial rests on the assumption that mental health problems are like the result of a lack of proper spirituality. Okay, so the reason I bring all this up is because the group that's been pushing for chaplains in schools, is this group called the National School Chaplain Association. And this is their website. I'm just scrolling down here. Who are we? The National School Chaplain Association was established to promote school chaplains as legitimate and necessary members of a school staff through national standards for school chaplains. They have no standards. But I'm scrolling down to show you one thing here. Board of directors for this organization, this dude on the left, his name is Rocky Malloy. He's the leader of the organization. Remember that name for 1 second. So Rocky Malloy is, if you read his bio, he is like a self-described former international drug trafficker, but he's since reformed, and now he works for Jesus. And that's why he wants your kids to have Jesus. And this week he appeared on a show hosted by David Barton, who is infamous for being this Christian pseudo-historian that lies about history. And he was on the show to talk about why they need chaplains in public schools. And the co-host of this show, whose name is Rick Green, he asked Rocky Malloy, hey, you're passing all these bills to get chaplains in schools. Wouldn't this backfire if, say, Satanist chaplains use these laws to get themselves into schools? And Rocky Malloy said, don't worry, we're a step ahead of you. We have it all figured out. Let me play this for you, and then we will talk about this.
Let's talk about those states now where it's happening. Some people get concerned that, okay, if you open the door to this, you have to let a Satanist church or whatever they call themselves, come in and take that job on the campus. I mean, what's the parameters for what a chaplain is or isn't?
Well, you know what? I think, Rick, that's a very legitimate question, but it comes with a certain amount of really lack of information. There's no such thing as a satanic chaplain. I know they threaten that, but there are none. And there's not one satanic chaplain hired by the federal government. Zero. They don't qualify.
So it's a red herring, really. People raise this, but it's a non-existent challenge.
It's non-existent. It's a typical demonic threat. They have no resources. They have no chaplains recognized because they don't qualify. A thing called black letter laws, U.S. Constitution. If you blaspheme God, you do not qualify to be a religion. So no Satanist can get a job saying equal access because they're not in that group.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I love that. Oh, man, you know this stuff.
You guys, he does not know his stuff. First of all, I've never seen anyone whose face and voice do not match the way that guy's face and voice do not match. But there you go. But he said a couple things that are worth pointing out. He said there's no such thing as a satanic chaplain. That is not true. More on that in a second. He said there is not one satanic chaplain hired by the federal government. Zero. That is true, but I'll show you in a second. That's not exactly a fair argument to make. But then he points out they have no chaplains recognized because they don't qualify. If you blaspheme God, you do not qualify to be a religion. So no Satanist can get a job saying equal access because they're not in that group. That right there is BS. And by the way, the fact that this guy is saying it openly is concerning. The Freedom from Religion Foundation in Alabama, there's one of these chaplain bills being considered. And one of their attorneys at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Ryan Jane, submitted testimony against this bill. And look at one of the things he wrote in there. The CEO of the National School Chaplain Association, Rocky Malloy, testified in support of a similar bill in Georgia this year and recommended defining chaplains to exclude disfavored religious minorities, which is the same thing he did in that clip. This undercuts any suggestion that chaplains are intended to do anything other than promoting religion generally and Christianity specifically, which is the right complaint. The fact that Rocky Malloy is so gung-ho about saying, no, Christian chaplains are fine, all other chaplains don't really count, he's kind of giving away the game right there, right? So the thing about, does Satanism count as a religion? If you blaspheme God, you don't count as a religion, he said. That's not true either. And I'll give you just a couple quick examples of it. I mean, first of all, even if the question of whether atheism is a religion is more of a philosophical one, case law, the Supreme Court, name your legal argument, they have repeatedly said we are going to treat non-theism, atheism, humanism, whatever, as a religion when it comes to First Amendment issues and freedom of religion. So that's already a done deal. I'll show you this. In 2017, the U.S. military actually issued a press release saying in response to lawsuits, I'm not going to get into it, they issued an updated list of all the religions they count. So when someone is an inmate and they enter federal prison and they fill out like forms with their biographical information, they can mark what religion they are. And this is part of this chart the military released. And look at what it says here. This is just like page 4, but you could see it just lists any number of religious denominations. And you could see the number that's like right over here. It says these were added to the list on March 31st, 2017. So these are the new additions to the list. They were saying, we want to make sure we are as accurate as possible. So we're adding these things to the list. And look what you get on page, what are we at here? This is page 5. Still a lot of smaller groups there. But here, check this out. They added pagan, humanist to the list. And also on the list, as they had been for a while, you also have no religious preference. That was removed because there were other options there. Where are they? At the very end of this list, I believe. Yeah. Atheist, agnostic. You can say you have no religious preference. You could say you have no religion. You can not answer the question if you don't want to. You could just say it's unknown. So like all of these are considered categories of religion according to the U.S. military, which is to say these are considered religions by the U.S. government as far as First Amendment freedoms go. And if you're wondering about Satanism specifically, well, guess what? Here's the Associated Press from 2019, the Satanic Temple. The IRS has designated it a tax-exempt church. So like the IRS thinks it's a religion. It qualifies as such. So what are you talking about? It's not a religion. So what about this notion that there are no Satanist chaplains in the government? Because that is true. There are no atheist, humanist chaplains in the military either. That is true, but it's not because we don't have any. In fact, this has been the source of controversy because when a humanist chaplain with impeccable credentials tried to become a chaplain in the military, kind of egged on by Republican politicians, said, yeah, we're just not going to include you. You don't count. That's a political decision. That's not because there are no humanist chaplains out there. So like past prejudice is not and should never be a basis for future prejudice. You know what I mean? So saying that, oh, there are no satanic chaplains recognized by the government, that's an argument for why we ought to accept them, not an argument for why we ought to keep discriminating against them. Okay, so regardless of label, though, many of these chaplain in schools laws, they give virtually free rein to groups to certify their own chaplains, which means public schools may have to consider giving non-theistic chaplains access to kids if they want to play this game. And I found this funny because in different articles where there were states considering bills like these, Satanists spoke up. This is from Iowa. Check this out. In Iowa, where they were considering this bill, if this bill does pass, I am excited for the opportunities it presents for the Satanic Temple to provide support services and programs to school children in our state, a minister of the Satanic Temple said. Iowa has several ordained ministers of Satan, and we would be happy to engage children. Lovely. That bill died. It didn't pass. And maybe it didn't pass because people did not want Satanists having access to kids, which means it worked. In Utah, a similar bill was also defeated, but not before a Satanist also spoke out there. Check this out. While I would strongly prefer that Utah and other states do not enact bills that mingle religion with state functions, I can personally attest to the fact that the Satanic Temple, committed to the principles of equal religious representation and community service, is ready to embrace this new potential role within Utah's communities. Yeah, they are. Good for them. And in Florida, let me show you one more here. In Florida this week, where they were considering this bill, more on that in a second, David Williamson, president of the Central Florida Free Thought Community, accused the legislation of being a way to further privilege the Christian majority and to try to recruit more people. But also he said, we will definitely be pursuing opportunities to be involved in this program if this bill passes. These forums need to be tested to make sure they are equal, and non-religious students need support because they're growing fast, and that is probably scaring the Christians. So like atheists were saying, yeah, we'll be ready for them as well. The bottom line is that if a state wants to allow chaplains in schools, they will not be able to discriminate against non-Christians or non-religious groups, all of which would be able to certify their own chaplains however they deem fit. Groups like the Satanic Temple and the Central Florida Free Thought Community there, they do have resources. They can ordain chaplains. The Humanist Society, the Center for Inquiry, they ordain chaplains as well. They do qualify. The American Humanist Association does this too. And yeah, they might blaspheme God in the process, because why the hell not? None of that prohibits them from taking part in these programs meant to shove Jesus in public schools, right? It's unconstitutional to try to not allow them to do it. And I wanted to bring up one last thing about this, because in Florida, just yesterday, I believe, they did sign their chaplaincy bill into law. And I want to show you this right here. This is the bill Florida just signed. It's House Bill 931. And if I show you the text of this, look at this right here. This is the text of the bill that is now law in Florida. And it says a couple things. Here's the new addition to the law. Each school district or charter school may adopt a policy to authorize volunteer school chaplains to provide support services and programs to students as assigned by the district school board or charter school governing board. So volunteer school chaplains can, if the district wants it to, they can come in, and they must, at a minimum, if they want to participate in this program, the school districts have to what? A, describe the support services or programs that volunteer school chaplains may be assigned. That's fine. B, require that principals of schools with a voluntary school chaplain inform all parents of the availability of these supports, services, and programs. That's fine. C, require written parental consent before a student participates in or receives support services and programs provided by a volunteer school chaplain. Parents must be permitted to select a volunteer school chaplain from the list provided by the school district, which must include the chaplain's religious affiliation, if any. That's a clever thing they added in the bill, basically saying we are going to give all parents a list that these are all the Christian chaplains, and if a Satanist is in the mix, it's not going to say like Chaplain Bob Smith. It's going to say Chaplain Bob Smith, comma, Satanist. And by the way, your kids can't go see that dude. Parents have to sign off on it first. So basically, it's a way to show parents, like, listen, you can totally just say yes to the Christian ones. You don't have to say yes to the Muslim, humanist, Satanist chaplains there too. What are the requirements for these chaplains? Well, let's see. Any school district must publish the list of volunteer school chaplains, including their religious affiliations, on the website. Yeah, that's fine. So what? What do they need to do? Do these chaplains need a degree? Do they need to pass some bar? Let's see. Well, background screening for certain employees and volunteer school, they have to go through a background check. That's fine. Okay. That's pretty much the whole bill. It's dumb. It's a really, really bad bill. But this is what they are doing in Florida now. There's nothing that says these chaplains cannot proselytize to kids. They can absolutely do that if they get the parental permission to do so. You can imagine someone going to their school counselor or something saying, I need to talk to somebody because maybe I'm gay, I'm queer, I'm trans, I need to talk to somebody. And their parents are like, that's fine. Go see Chaplain Christian over here. And that chaplain says, you need Jesus, not actual help. You just need Jesus. Like, there's no rules saying chaplains cannot do that, which is only going to make the situation worse. There's nothing in the law in Florida requiring chaplains to have any specific set of qualifications. Any random idiot who gets a stamp of approval from any religious group gets to be a chaplain. And you know there are going to be churches that are like, hey, if you're a member of this church, I'm just going to stamp a thing that says all of you are chaplains now. I want you to go to your school districts and get on their lists. We're one step closer to getting Christians in every public school in the community. So that's going to happen. And the one person who doesn't seem to understand how the First Amendment works on any of this is, of course, Ron DeSantis, the governor. Because here's what he said. I want to play this for you. Here's what he said at a press conference yesterday.
Now, some have said that if you do a school chaplain program, that somehow you're going to have Satanists running around in all our schools. Please understand, we're not playing those games in Florida. That is not a religion. That is not qualifying to be able to participate in this. So we're going to be using common sense when it comes to this. So you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. DeSantis, as usual, has no clue what he's doing. You might have Satanist chaplains, and they would be allowed to participate in this program. And if they are kicked out by the district, if a humanist, atheist chaplain is kicked out by these school districts, not allowed to participate, even though they've passed the background check and everything, you can bet there will be a lawsuit. Ron DeSantis doesn't just get to say, we're not playing those games, we're going to use common sense. Like, no. That's not how the law works. Like, you can't just say, oh, I don't like this religion, so it's not a religion. You don't get to do that. As I showed you already, the U.S. government considers paganism, atheism, a religion as far as, First Amendment issues go. The Satanic Temple is considered a church by the IRS. These are religions, whether he likes them or not, at least as it comes to a label. And it's not even the first time Ron DeSantis has said all this. You may remember last December that in Iowa, the Satanic Temple put up a display in the Iowa state capitol. And then some vandal came around and destroyed it. Here's what Ron DeSantis said after that vandal destroyed it. You could see the first thing: a Christian veteran has torn down and beheaded the Satanic Temple statue in the Iowa capitol. That's December of 2023. Here's Ron DeSantis. Satan has no place in our society and should not be recognized as a religion by the federal government. I'll chip in to contribute to this Veterans Legal Defense Fund. Good prevails over evil. That's the American spirit. And then he lost the presidential primary. Like, again, what is he talking about? Satan has no place, so it shouldn't be recognized as a religion. Do you know how many religions there are that are not Christian, and Christians would say violate Christianity or whatever? Like, why? This idea that I'm going to chip into the vandal here for destroying public property, that guy who vandalized that statue, he's going on trial next month, and he may have hate crime charges attached to what he did, which would heighten any punishment if he gets one. So Ron DeSantis is saying, yep, vandalism in the name of Jesus, I'm all for it. Like, that's how horrible Ron DeSantis is. Legally speaking, though, it seems like the only person who knows what's going on, Satanic Temple's well aware of what's going on. This is what the Satanic Temple said. Despite DeSantis's contempt for religious liberty, the Constitution guarantees our equal treatment under the law, and DeSantis is not at liberty to amend the Constitution by fiat at whim, said Lucian Greaves, co-founder of the Satanic Temple. He just invited Satanic chaplains into public schools, whether he likes it or not. Yeah, he also told me, Lucian Greaves told me in an email, that DeSantis's speech there was nothing more than empty grandstanding. And he said if a public school or a charter school is foolish enough to believe DeSantis, they are in for a hell of a battle. And the funny thing about what Ron DeSantis said is that the lawmaker who proposed the chaplain law, she tried really hard to make sure that sort of thing never happened. Check this out. This is from the Christian Post. Florida State Senator Erin Grell, a Republican who represents Vero Beach, did not respond for comment, blah, blah, blah. But she is concerned about the potential of satanic priests taking advantage of the legislation she sponsored. But I think that as soon as we get in the middle of defining what is religion and what is not, and whether or not someone can be available and on a list, we start to run up to constitutional problems. That's the sponsor of the bill. Like, she seems to get that this is going to be a problem if you allow it to be. And she tried really hard not to make it a problem. And now Ron DeSantis signs the law and makes it a problem for everybody. So the question now is, okay, are Satanists going to participate in the program? Are humanists going to participate in the program? As far as I know, the answer is yes. If any school district says yes to allowing volunteer chaplains, they are going to make sure their people also sign up to be on those lists. And you would think Ron DeSantis would learn his lesson by now, because if there's one thing Ron DeSantis is famous for, it's the book banning in Florida and allowing random parents to say, there's a book I don't like in this school district, so I want it off the shelves so kids don't have access to it. And this week, Ron DeSantis was in the news. Why? Check this out. Check this headline. DeSantis tweaks Florida book challenge law, blames liberal activists who wanted Bible out of schools. There was an activist, Chaz Stevens, who basically said, well, if they're trying to get LGBTQ books out of schools, I'm going to fill out paperwork to get the Bible out of all these school districts. And later on in here, check this out. The Associated Press asked DeSantis' office for examples of liberal activists abusing the law, and it provided one. Chaz Stevens, a South Florida resident who has often lampooned government. Stevens raised challenges in dozens of school districts over the Bible, dictionaries, and thesauruses. And he got them off the shelves, and so they tweaked the law. Chaz Stevens said, when they need to make stupid stupider, they send me up. I'm part comedian, I'm part activist, I'm part artist. I just want a better society, Stevens said. I'm an idiot, but a smart guy at the same time. Chaz Stevens also told me, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And Ron DeSantis is a master of playing stupid games. He loves to fight culture war battles, and the Republican-dominated Florida legislature is happy to play right along, but they're sloppy. And they write bad laws that can be exploited by anybody, like if you want to use a book ban to ban the Bible, or use a volunteer chaplain law to get Satanists in front of kids. Like, there are always valid and legal ways to fight fire with fire. And if Florida Republicans don't like that, they can stop passing thoughtless bills. But if they didn't have thoughtless bills, they would have nothing to do. By the way, there were amendments to this bill that would have prevented proselytizing, that would have asked for student consent before meeting with the chaplain, that would have required some common sense credentials for all volunteers, even though it was skewed toward Christians. And it would have established an oversight committee to handle potential complaints with schools that bring in chaplains. All of those amendments failed because Republicans did not want them in the bill. So these are problems waiting to happen, all because Republicans and Ron DeSantis and people like them just are so desperate to get Christians in public schools, they don't realize they're opening the door to Satanists and humanists, and saying that they're not allowed in there isn't enough to stop them from getting in there. The wisest thing, if you're a school district, the smartest thing that could happen right now is you just do nothing. Don't accept the premise of the bill. The bill gives school districts the right to bring in volunteer school chaplains if they want to, and open that door and open the floodgates, but they don't have to. School districts would be better off making sure they have qualified mental health professionals and counselors, and just say no to all the chaplains and be done with it. You don't have to take them up on this. That would be the smart thing to do. You avoid all the lawsuits. You make sure kids have qualified professionals to work with. Doing what Ron DeSantis wants you to do will help absolutely nobody. And if these kids want to see a Christian chaplain, they can go to church. All right, no one's stopping them from doing it. Okay. I'm going to stop there for a bit. Oh, these people. What other questions we got here, Den? Do they need to have the same qualifications as the social workers? No, because if you're a social worker or a mental health counselor, you have to have a degree and certification by a professional board. I think that's true of pretty much any public school in the country if you want to be like a social worker or a counselor. The chaplains, there's no qualification list. If some church says you are qualified as a chaplain and they get to make up their own rules, then you count. And again, some churches, some groups, you have to go through training of sorts to be a chaplain, and that's nice. But some churches are more interested in just shoving Christians into public schools. So they will do what they did with vaccines back in the COVID days and say, oh, you need an exemption? I'll just sign a paper for you and sign my name. And here, you can have a pastoral exemption, a religious exemption from getting vaccinated. They'll do the same thing with chaplains. They'll just say, here's 1,000 pieces of paper. If you want to be a chaplain, bring it to me. I'll sign it for you. We're done. Like, that's what I'm afraid of. So no, they don't need qualifications. What if they counsel an LGBTQ person? Yeah. What if they do? That is my fear. If you have unqualified chaplains working with, for example, LGBTQ students whose parents say, I want you to meet with this chaplain, there's nothing stopping these chaplains from saying you need to undergo conversion therapy. You need to just pray away the gay, pray to undo the transing, whatever language they want to use. What's stopping them from doing that? As far as I can tell, nothing in the law. But what are they going to do when a Baptist parent objects to a Catholic chaplain advising their child? My mom would have been furious. Well, in the case of Florida, anyway, they would have a list of all the chaplains with their religious affiliations, so a Baptist parent can make sure their kid sees a Baptist chaplain if that's what happens. But in other states, there may not be that sort of thing. There may not be a list. There may not be religious affiliations next to a chaplain's name. That's where it gets dicey. Because again, there's no good template all these people are working off of. They're all going at it by themselves and they're all making sloppy mistakes. Who is funding that organization? That's a good question, the chaplaincy one. You know what? I don't know off the top of my head. I would need to go back and do some research on that. So I'm not going to answer it because I don't know the answer. But that's a fair question. Who is funding the lobbying group that's trying to get chaplains in schools? Doesn't Aaron Ra count as a satanic chaplain? You know what? I don't know if I know who Aaron Ra is. I don't know if he is a satanic chaplain, but if he is, and they pass this in Texas, maybe he can jump through some hoops. How would you like it if Aaron Ra came to your kid's school? I'm sure some Christian parents would have a problem. I'm glad there's a background check at least. Yeah, I mean, the bare minimum, it's something. They are volunteers. They are not getting paid. Who wants to do that? That's correct. They are not getting paid to do this. Who would want to do that? Oh, I promise you, there are lots of Christians who are like, I wish I could get into public schools to talk to the kids, but there's no way in right now. But now that door has been opened. And again, school districts would be foolish to allow it to open, even though they have the option to do so. But man, there are so many Christians who would jump at the chance to get in front of public school heathens and preach to them. How would an atheist be a chaplain? In theory, you would have to find an organization that has chaplaincies, like the Humanist Society, the American Humanist Association, the Center for Inquiry. If you go to their websites and search like chaplains, they will say you have to take these classes to get certified from us to be a chaplain. And like, they want to look good. They're not going to sign off on anybody. But you could search Humanist Chaplain, Atheist Chaplain. You will find websites that say these are the organizations that do it. These are the hoops you have to jump through to become one. And they're legit. I mean, they actually do a lot of good work. So they do exist. The question is, if there are no qualifications, what is stopping, for example, me? If I lived in Florida, what's stopping me from starting my own atheist group and just saying we give out chaplain certificates to anybody who gives me $3? I don't know why that wouldn't qualify. I wouldn't trust the current SCOTUS to care what the Constitution says. That is fair. Doesn't mean there won't be legal challenges. And remember, even if the Supreme Court is very right-leaning right now, I mean, they are, most cases never get to the Supreme Court. So if you file a lawsuit over this, and it's a federal lawsuit or a state lawsuit, odds are you're going to get heard probably by a judge who knows what they're doing. and this would never reach the Supreme Court. So I think it's we're talking way into the future to talk about SCOTUS ruling on any of this. Thank you for that donation. Homeless shelters suck. Give people housing. I agree, Catalina. Thank you for that. I messaged Aaron. I'll let you know what he has to say. Thank you so much. Report back soon. Okay, I'm going to jump to another story here. Give me 1 second to pull this up and then get rid of another million tabs. Here we go. Okay. Tennessee has a brand new state book. They actually have several state books, and one of them is the Bible. And not just any Bible, but a specific one. And I want to talk about that because this is something Republicans in Tennessee have been working on for over a decade. They have been trying to make the Bible the official state book in Tennessee since like 2015. Never figured out how to legally make it work. And they just figured out how to do it this week. And here's a quick recap. In 2015, there was a state representative named Jerry Sexton, and he filed a bill to make the Holy Bible the official state book. And it didn't work because even though it passed in the Tennessee House, the Senate chose to ignore it. And the reason is because the Attorney General at the time was like, you guys, this is unconstitutional. You cannot make the Holy Bible the state book. So the Senate did nothing with it. Didn't happen. In 2016, the House and the Senate passed basically the exact same type of bill. But at the time, the governor of Tennessee, Bill Haslam, he vetoed that bill in 2016. Why? Basically because the Attorney General was like, you guys, it's still unconstitutional. So he vetoed the bill, and good for him for doing that. And thankfully, Republicans in Tennessee didn't have the numbers they needed to override the veto. So that's good. In 2021, there was another effort to make the Bible the state book. That one failed. And that was in part because the lieutenant governor of Tennessee, a Republican, Randy McNally, he said something counterintuitive. He said, we don't want to make the Bible the official state book because, like, we have a state flower. Why would we want to put the Bible on the same level as other random symbols? So he's like, by making the Bible the official state book, you're actually degrading the Bible. And so that bill in 2021 didn't get the votes it needed to pass. So Jerry Sexton, the guy who was pushing for this for so many years, he is now retired. He's out of there, but Tennessee is still overrun by Republicans. And this year, they tried passing a bill. It was House Bill 1828, and a different group of people tried passing this one. And you could see in the highlighted bit right up there, I'm going to show you this. On April 16th, this week, it was signed into law by the governor. This one passed. This one got the job done. And basically, the state representative and the state senator who sponsored this bill, here's what they did to get around the pesky Constitution. They did not make the Holy Bible the official state book. They made, check this out, this headline right here. Here we go. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee signs bill making the Aitken Bible an official state book. And I know you're wondering, what is the Aitken Bible? Didn't that guy like almost win American Idol? No. The key word in this headline is an official state book, because what they did is they said, we want to make a bunch of things the state books, plural, and the Bible's going to be one of them. And that's how they're getting around this. So I want to show you this bill for a second. We'll get to the Aitken part in a second. But here's the list. Here's the list of what they're saying are the official state books of Tennessee. And look at this. Tennessee Code. This part of the Tennessee Code is amended. We're going to add a new section. The following are designated as the official state books. Let's go through these one by one. Number 1, Farewell Address to the American People, George Washington. Why is that on the list? That's a speech George Washington gave. Has nothing to do with Tennessee. It's not even a book. Why is that on the list? I don't know. Number 2, Democracy in America by Tocqueville. The French dude who wrote back to France about how cool American democracy is. Again, what does that have to do with Tennessee? I don't know. That is a book, but like, why would you make that the Tennessee state book? That doesn't make any sense. We'll get back to the Aitken Bible because this is what this whole bill is all about. Back to that soon. What else we got? The Papers of Andrew Jackson. Okay, they're housed at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. So there is a Tennessee connection, but also, like, why do you want to honor Andrew Jackson? Isn't that like the Trail of Tears, dude? Like, he's on the list of all the bad presidents. I don't know why you want to pretend like this guy's a good dude. He's not the president you want to honor. So weird, but at least there's kind of a connection. But by the way, that's not even a book. That's just his papers. Roots by Alex Haley. Alex Haley was a Tennessean. Roots is a classic book and then a classic miniseries. That one makes sense. That alone should be the Tennessee State book. What else we got? Death in the Family by the playwright James Agee. Fine. All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren. I'm pretty sure Robert Penn Warren's more of a Kentucky dude than Tennessee, but okay. That's a book at least. You got American Lion by John Meacham. Fine. The Civil War, a narrative. It's a history of the Civil War by the historian Shelby Foote, who I believe was a fan of the Confederacy. I'm not sure why you want to honor him or Andrew Jackson, so that's weird. And then look at this one. Coat of Many Colors by Dolly Parton. Here's the thing. I know it's Tennessee. I know it's Dolly Parton, who is all about Tennessee, has Dollywood in Pigeon Forge. Nashville's obviously in Tennessee. I get why you want to honor Dolly Parton. But that book, Coat of Many Colors, that's not a famous book. That's a kid's book. That's just a random book that Dolly Parton put out. Like, there's no reason you would make a random book put out by a celebrity a few years ago your official state book. Here's the reason they put that on the list. You can quote me on this. The reason they put that on there is because if anyone votes against this bill, there will be ads against you that say, you voted against Dolly Parton. How dare you in the holy state of Tennessee? That's why they put that book on the list. So, like, the thing is, this is a dumb list. There are a couple books that you can argue deserve to be on there, and they would be fine symbols as the Tennessee State book. But most of them have no business being on this list. You know what I mean? You could have also, where's Cormac McCarthy? There's a famous author who's from Tennessee. Why aren't any of his books on the list? I don't know. It's a padded list to hide the Bible in it. That's why they put together that list. Okay, so let's get to the other question. What is the Aitken Bible that is on this list? And if I scroll up here, you could see their explanation of it. The whereas clauses. Check this out. Whereas on September 12, 1782, the Congress of the United States approved the printing of the first American Bible. When the American Revolution began, America stopped trade with Britain, cutting off our country's supply of Bibles and causing the printer for the Journals of Congress, Robert Aitken, to publish the first American Bible, also known as the Aitken Bible. Whereas Tennessee is home of the largest publisher of authentic reproductions of the Aitken Bible, the Aitken Bible Historical Foundation. Tennessee is also home to 3 of the 5 privately owned original first American Bibles remaining in the world today. Okay, that stuff is true. I don't know why you want to brag about, like, hey, we are home of the biggest publishers of the copies of this book from a few hundred years ago. That's a weird thing to be proud of, but okay. But all right, fine. There's some vague historical connection. The Aitken Bible were like, those were the first Bibles printed in the US. Fine. But there's a reason the Aitken Bible is on this list specifically. And the reason is that it's a prop that, like, Christian pseudo-historian David Barton, who I mentioned earlier, he has been using the Aitken Bible in his presentations for so many years, okay? He has been fighting to get that Bible in everyone's head. In his telling of the story, the Aitken Bible was printed by Congress and intended for use in public schools. That's what David Barton says. He also says, like, see, Congress printed it. It's for use in schools. Therefore, we should get the Bible back in schools. That's why it's famous that they've been saying all this stuff. And the thing is, Here's what you should know about the Aitken Bible. And this is written by Chris Rada, who's been doing so much research on David Barton over the years. Barton's bogus claim about this Bible, it was printed by Congress for the use of schools, proof that the founders never intended a separation between church and state. Needless to say, Glenn Beck and his audience, who hosted David Barton, they are just eating this stuff up. What Chris Rada writes in that essay and her books is basically that the argument that it was made for use in public schools, Congress didn't say that. Robert Aitken wrote that in the margin of the book, like, we can use this in schools. And that was it. Like, no one cares what he wrote in the margin. It wasn't for use in public schools. But David Barton has been lying about that for years. What about the argument that Congress printed these Bibles? No, they didn't. Robert Aitken basically went up to the government and the Congress confirmed this is an accurate representation of the Bible. But Congress did not buy copies of it. They did not print it themselves. They didn't pay for it to be published. They just said, yeah, that's the book. And if you want to print the Bible, that's the Bible. And so Robert Aitken published it. Like, there's really nothing special about that book. The only reason people in Tennessee are now codifying it into law here as the official state book is because David Barton has spent so many years promoting the Aitken Bible as evidence that we are a so-called Christian nation. It's practically canon in the world of Christian revisionists and Christian nationalists. That's why it's now an official state book. Its inclusion on that list is a slap in the face to other deserving authors and deserving books on that list. But because its inclusion is cloaked in secular language, and because it's only one of many books on the list, you're probably not going to see any lawsuits over this. I do find it interesting that on that list of Tennessee authors, you have one woman, Dolly Parton, who should not even be on the list. You have one author of color, Alex Haley, with Roots, who alone should be on the list. It's not a really diverse group right there. If anything, Tennessee doesn't need stronger connections to Christianity. It needs a lot less of it. But this is how they finally got the Bible as the official state book after a 10-year attempt. All right, going to pause there for some questions. I had a couple other short stories I wanted to talk about, but that's it there. Collection of book with a Bible as one of them. Sneaky. Yep, it's a collection of books. The Bible is on that list. And again, most of those things should be on the list. So really, they wanted just the Bible. They couldn't do that. So this is the way they're getting around it. It's like putting up the 10 Commandments, but you can't just put up the 10 Commandments. So you do what they did in Texas, which is, well, we're putting up a bunch of monuments, including the 10 Commandments, and now it's legal. I'm sure everyone in Tennessee are so stoked that their elected officials are using time and taxpayer money on this. Yep. And right now, I believe they're in the process of trying to pass a bill to give like hundreds of millions of dollars to vouchers so kids can go to private Christian schools and siphon that money away from public schools. Like, they're just, these Republicans in Tennessee are doing everything they can to make it worse for people in school. I think they're also considering a bill to arm teachers, which I promise you, teachers do not want to come to school with guns. Just a bunch of idiots in that legislature. And then like 4 Democrats who are amazing. Can't help but think Alex Haley, the Alex Haley one only came about because someone was looking at their list and thinking maybe we should find something so people don't lambaste us for having only books from white men. I think you might be right. And then they're like, oh, right, Dolly Parton, throw her on the list too. That's probably what they did. I'm surprised they didn't use the Trump Bible. I wonder if they wrote this bill before the Trump Bible came out. Because, yeah, it's entirely plausible. It's Lee Greenwood. I think he has connections to Nashville, even if he's in Branson. What else we got? From Aaron Ra. I don't have an ordination with the Satanic Temple. I could get one with the local chapter. So you could see Aaron Ra as a chaplain in public schools, theoretically. We need to get that out there more. Scare Texans into knowing what will happen if they allow chaplains in their schools. All right, I'm going to move on to another story here. This is fascinating in North Dakota. Let me pull this up here. Okay. North Dakota Republicans, and really, if you're in North Dakota, you're a Republican, They have officially endorsed a Christian nationalist and an opponent of public schools to run the state's public schools. And this is weird. We have seen this happen in Oklahoma. This is a headline of what's happened ever since Oklahoma elected Ryan Walters to be the superintendent of public instruction there. This is a headline that came out, I think, just last week. She couldn't wait to work for Ryan Walters' administration. Now she's worried public schools won't survive the rest of his term. That's how bad Ryan Walters has been in that state. He has lost 130 staffers in his department who have quit. He has missed out on grants provided by the federal government amounting to millions of dollars. His office has become a haven for right-wing lunatics, including the woman who runs Libs on TikTok, who is now part of his administration, like as part of the curriculum oversight committee or something. That's what Ryan Walters has done in Oklahoma. It's a disaster. And for some reason, Republicans in North Dakota want to replicate that failure. Here's what they did in North Dakota. I need to tell you this before I tell you what they did this week. Right now, this is the lady who is the state superintendent of public education. Her name is Kirsten Basler. She's the superintendent of public education there. And I just want to point to you, this is her about her biography on the government's website, on the state's website. And the only thing I need to show you on here, you could skim through what I highlighted. This woman, I do not know much about how good she is in her job or what her politics are. She's a Republican, for what it's worth. But you could see she has experience with education. This bio says she serves on more than a dozen education-related boards. She oversees billions of dollars that benefit the state's public schools. She is the chair of a state committee that screens candidates for the Board of Higher Education. She works with the School for the Deaf and the Hard of Hearing. If I scroll down here, before she took office in 2013, Superintendent Basler had a 24-year career in the public school system, the state's largest school district. She was a vice principal, library media specialist, classroom teacher, instructional assistant. She spent 9 years as an elected member of the school board, as the board's president. She worked as the assistant director of the North Dakota School Boards Association. So whatever you want to say about a Republican in charge of public instruction, that lady's got more credentials, I would guess, than anyone else in the state, right? That lady deserves to be in that position. I hope she's good at her job. I mean, she certainly has the resume you would hope for someone taking on that job, right? And I say that as someone who doesn't like Republicans. She is a Republican. She has the credentials. Okay, that's the lady who is the current state superintendent in North Dakota. She's going to be up for re-election this year on the ballot. So this month, the North Dakota Republican Party held its convention. And they don't get to vote on anything, but they can offer endorsements. They did not endorse that lady to be the state superintendent of public instruction. No. Instead, here's the headline I want to share with you from the North Dakota Monitor. Advocate for 10 Commandments in schools wins the North Dakota GOP support to lead public education. Basically, the delegates at this convention voted by like a 2-to-1 margin to endorse this guy, Jim Bartlett, as the next state superintendent. It's the highest ranking, he would be the highest ranking elected official overseeing education. Now, it is only an endorsement, doesn't count for anything. The Republican primary takes place on June 11th. So keep that in mind. But this guy is messed up. I mean, this decision is dumb for a couple of reasons. One, as I showed you, the Republican they have in that job is really, really credentialed. She seems to be really good at what she does. I hope she's good at what she does. She has the background to prove it, right? Why are you trying to oust her when you're not going to find someone better than her, at least on paper? So that doesn't make any sense. The second thing is the guy they promoted, Jim Bartlett, is an opponent. He's an enemy of public education. Because I went to this guy's website and it's insane. He wants to, first of all, he wants to eliminate the office that he's running for to make sure all decisions for public education are made at the local level, which might sound nice in theory, except if your community, if you live in one of those like rural red communities, your public school system, if it was fully decided by the people who live there, kids aren't going to learn anything of value. Like, you need a state level curriculum, you need a baseline, you need some restrictions and rules in place, and then they can modify beyond that as they see fit. But you need some guidance from above. You don't want local level control for everything. But let me show you this man's website, because it's legit insane. Let me go to Jim Bartlett's website. Here's the first thing you see, the top of the page. Let's look at the, there was a Christian cultural context to the 1889 North Dakota Constitution, which requires the teaching of morals. Today, moral relativism has replaced the Ten Commandment morals with serious consequences. God's judgment on the school system is evident in the appalling academic standards, the corruption of morals, and the propagation of evils flowing from the emphasis on indoctrination. And then he lists the Ten Commandments. Like, if you're a graphic designer, I'm sorry you have to look at this. He has a list of the 10 commandments right there. But you could see Bartlett for superintendent right there. Fuel the campaign. There's his website. It's deranged. Okay. So first of all, there's also this image I did not show you. Let me show you this one right here. Check this one out. Bring back the 10 commandments to restore the 4 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and reality. Because this guy knows about reality. And you know, because he wants to bring back the 10 commandments. Holy crap. Okay, so this guy is scary. Elsewhere on his site, by the way, he says things like special education should be handled like homeschooling or with private tutors, which would be a disaster for special needs students who would already be deprived of social workers or other district employees with expertise in those areas. Then he says that when it comes to education, the keys, I want to see if I could find this right here. The keys for education, where did he put them? He wants to make sure, here we go. How will you get this done? By making decisions and teaching parents how to understand the philosophies operating in their schools. Look at this. The keys, I'm going right here where it's highlighted. The keys are recognizing God's legitimate authority, 5th commandment. What is the 5th commandment? If I scroll back up, honor authority. All right. What else do you got to do? And socialism. What? 6th commandment. Let me go back. The keys to getting this done, getting his wishes done, are recognizing God's legitimate authority and socialism. I don't think the grammar is correct there. But also, what does he mean by socialism? He says the 6th commandment. What's the 6th commandment again? No murder. What the hell does that sentence mean? I have no idea. Maybe some of you in the comments can decipher this for me, because I cannot make sense of this. I don't know what's going on his website. Okay, so there's that. That makes no sense. He also said in an interview that North Dakota was teaching 15,000 children how to be socialist right now. No citation provided. Let me show you another thing that's on his crazy website. He talked about the speech he gave at the convention. And he said, key points of the speech include there's a leftist agenda in the schools using humanism, Marxism, postmodernism. And I think all 3 of those words are like the word woke to right-wingers, which is by which I mean he doesn't know what any of those mean. So I don't know what he means by leftist agenda. He also says the North Dakota Constitution has a Christian moral context, whatever that means. And then what does he want to do? Returning to the Christian morals, aka the 10 commandments, intended by the North Dakota Constitution, quickly sorts out the bad philosophies, returns the power of education to parents, reduces the size of government, and increases the freedom to teach and learn. I promise you, ruling by the 10 commandments, the first 4 of which have nothing to do with anything, and then teaching a kindergartner that they should not covet thy neighbor's wife. I promise you, none of this is going to help any of the kids. North Dakota, like many red states, are suffering from a brain drain. So I don't know why you want to do this. And also, he didn't write this in that post, but apparently he used his 3-minute acceptance speech to lead delegates in the singing of Psalm 44. This is the guy they endorsed at the GOP convention. Just a bunch of deranged lunatics here. What about, here's another thing he wrote on his weird website. Check this out. Fargo, North Dakota, the biggest city in North Dakota, their biggest school district released a gender inclusion manual not long ago. Basically, it was a manual to help administrators and staffers learn how to make sure their LGBTQ students are felt included, which is very important. What did Jim Bartlett say about that? Well, here's what he wrote. This 34-page document should convince every parent to take their children out of the Fargo public schools. Fargo schools are an example of a modern Sodom and Gomorrah, which is destroying minds, hearts, bodies, and budgets. Again, how is it destroying their budgets? I have no idea. Bodies? I don't know. What do you think they're doing? It's amazing that the superintendent for North Dakota Public Schools, his first order of business is let me shit on the biggest school district in the state, the one that everyone actually wants to live in. Then he goes on to say any person or organization involved in or enabling this radical transgender agenda. What is that agenda, by the way? It's saying, hey, do you want to help LGBTQ students feel included? Here's what you could do. That's it. They should be identified and removed from the schools. This is child abuse to make kids feel welcome. Evil and against the North Dakota Constitution. God is judging this evil, and it would be safer to stay out of the way. Oh my God, this guy is crazy. Okay, once the evil philosophies are purged and a Christian context is returned under parental control, then the schools will be safer physically and psychologically, because the guy who makes crazy graphic design posters thinks he's psychologically fit. Okay. But again, here's maybe the worst thing I heard this guy say so far. He actually did an interview this week. Maybe it was last week, but it was with a radio host named Joel Heitkamp, who actually asked him good questions, like pushed back against some of his stuff. I'm surprised this guy said yes to it. But the question that the radio host asked is, well, under your Christian-centric leadership, would a Muslim person be allowed to be a school teacher? And the correct answer to that is, well, yeah, of course. There's no religious discrimination going on in our schools. That is not what Jim Bartlett said. I'm going to play for you what he actually said.
Would you allow a Muslim to be a teacher?
That's a good question. I think at that point it would be looking at the teacher. So imagine a classroom full of parents without teachers, without administrators, and then those parents are all Muslims, for instance. Me or somebody else could be at the front of the board saying right on the top of the board, complete parental control, left side of the board, right, vision statement for that school, objectives, and then start using lean accounting methods. So basically putting the value and numbers to what the parents actually want. Then if they want, so much of this religion, or they want to put social emotional learning in there, or CRT, or transgender, let's put a number on the balance sheet and profit and loss statement for each thing that they want, so then we can actually get the value that group of parents actually want.
Okay, I hope you heard that because it was wacky. First of all, can a Muslim teacher teach at a school? He said, that's a good question. I think it would be the looking at the teacher. That wasn't a yes. So that's messed up. Then he said, basically he said it depends on the local school boards who would have control, because they could put up on the board what they want in their district, like a vision board. And they could then say, we want this much religion, this much social emotional learning, this much critical race theory, or this much transgender. He said, quote, let's put a number on the balance sheet and profit and loss statement for each thing that they want, which apparently is their way of figuring out, should we hire a Muslim teacher or not? Well, we want to teach social emotional learning, so I guess no Muslims allowed. Or like, we want to teach kids that black people exist. It is North Dakota after all. So I guess no Jews can teach here. What is he talking about? How is the First Amendment something you put up on your budget sheet? And again, this is why you don't give local control for everything. You think every school district in any state, even one as sparsely populated as North Dakota, they're all going to get together and put together a budget that says, should we hire the Jews or should we teach kids about their social health and make sure they're able to learn in schools? Like, do we do math or should we teach them about like gay people existing? What does he think schools are like? This guy is insane. I guess he would be fine though if a local school district decided to refuse to hire non-Christian teachers. I mean, it's a lawsuit in the making, but okay. Like, this guy isn't just a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist who wants to lead the public schools in order to destroy the public schools, and then he replaced them with some weird Christian alternatives. He's just a whole bag of lawsuits waiting to be dropped on the state. And again, North Dakota Republicans endorsed this guy. The North Dakota Monitor, they wrote this: the vote for Bartlett was one example Friday of a state Republican Party that is shifting away from traditional candidates in favor of those who are more conservative. And I don't like that paragraph because they are downplaying what's happening. They are shifting away from qualified people to crazy lunatics because they're all MAGA cultists. That is what's happening here. Stop pretending, oh, this is a totally normal thing that just kind of happens. Like, stop downplaying how serious this is. I guess the one thing that is good about any of this, they did ask Kristen Basler, the woman who is currently in charge, like, so you lost the endorsement. What do you think about that? And this is what she said. She doesn't seem fazed by it. She said, the outcome from the convention doesn't change the great support and momentum behind her campaign with Republican primary voters. And this is true. Our convention process is flawed. It disenfranchises the tens of thousands of Republican voters who can't afford to take a Friday off from work or school so they could spend a couple $1,000s to vote in these contests. Like, yeah, she's right. That is a problem with these type of conventions. I think, reading between the lines there, it sounds like she doesn't think the endorsement of the North Dakota GOP is going to make a difference to voters. She's been in the job for a long time now. She apparently has the background to prove that she could do the job. Hopefully, again, I say this as a Democrat who has no desire to vote for a Republican. Hopefully, she'll beat this guy in the primary and then skate to victory in November, because that's inevitably what will happen to the Republican who wins the primary. It is scary, though, that a guy this awful has a stamp of approval from a major political party. Okay, I'm going to stop there for this one. Any questions here before I move to the last story? It almost sounds intentional. If you can break public schools, then they can claim it doesn't work and then justify funding private Christian schools as the mainstream. I think that is correct. That's also why many Republican-led states are pushing for school vouchers. They want to take money away from public education, which will hurt public education. They want to shift it over to private schools, by which they mean Christian schools, so they could say, look, public schools are not working, so send your kids wherever they want. Oh, look, there's a Christian school nearby. Yeah, Republicans are in the business of ruining public education. If you respect teachers and administrators and democracy, like, you cannot vote for a Republican. What is wrong with you? Do these morons seriously believe that as soon as kids enter public school, they're immediately taught nothing but socialism and atheism and LGBTQ plus ideology until they graduate? Yes. Yep. That is what they believe because they didn't pay attention in school themselves. If you ask a MAGA cultist type, what do you think happens on any given day in a high school, and have them like write up a little document and you show it to a kid who goes to high school, like a regular public high school, they will laugh at you and point at you and just mock the shit out of you because they live in an alternate reality and they just listen to conspiracy theorists. And if you listen to Joe Rogan or watch Fox News, you would come away thinking this is all that happens in public schools, and it's not. And everyone who's part of a public school or works there or pays attention to what their kids learn in school, which is not these parents, they would know that. But you have a lot of dumb people who have a lot of amplification of their bad ideas. That nonsense is completely insulting and demoralizing to teachers. Parents are not educational professionals. Most don't want to be. That is correct. And again, most parents have the good sense to say, I don't have the time or ability to do a good job of homeschooling my kids, but I support my public school district and I'm working with the teachers and I support the teachers to do a good job. And if I do have a problem with what's going on at school, there are ways I can show my frustration. I can write an email to the teacher. I can go to a school board meeting. There are normal ways normal people handle these things. But again, the idea that all parents should be homeschooling parents, dumb idea, not just impractical in this economy, but like, no, most parents don't have the knowledge to take their kids beyond a certain level. And you don't want them to. Let the professionals do it. And I'm not even knocking homeschooling here because some people do it well and they know how to handle, I don't know history, but that person knows history. So I can connect with them and we'll do like shifts and stuff like that. There are ways of handling this, but that is not what the people in charge in these Republican parties are promoting. So that's the problem there. It is really insulting to professional school districts have profit loss sheets. Like, yeah, district officials do, but you know what's not on their, like, you know what the CFO of a school district or the budget administrator is putting on their profit loss statement? It's not transgender. It's not critical race theory. It's like, oh, the school needs a new gym or the roof is leaking and we got to fix that. That's what they're worried about. Like, again, if you don't live in reality, you don't know that's what they're dealing with. Okay, I'm going to jump to one last story. I promise I'll make this quick. I've been going on long enough here, but this is an important story that I wanted to get to. The Louisiana Supreme Court just gave Catholic priests a free pass on sexually abusing children as long as they did it a long time ago. And this is despite Louisiana lawmakers trying to put a stop to that. This is a headline I saw in an article about this. Louisiana High Court says priests have a property right not to be sued for sexual abuse. And if that sounds horrifying, it's because it is. Let me try to explain to you what is going on here. Because when I was trying to read through the Supreme Court's opinion, the Louisiana Supreme Court's opinion, it was so poorly written. Like, it was all legalese and so hard to parse what they were doing. So I'll do my best to try to explain to you what's going on. All of this involves a law that the state of Louisiana, which is a very Republican state, passed in the wake of the Catholic Church's sex abuse scandal. So in 2021, the Louisiana legislature passed something called like a 3-year window for unresolved sexual abuse allegations. Basically, lawmakers realized that there are some victims of child sexual abuse who were unable to grapple with what happened to them until much later in life. And they knew this because that's what's been happening in other states. In other states, you have all these victims coming out and speaking about their abuse, and it's decades after the fact. So this is common knowledge now. And the problem is that by the time they're old enough to know, oh, this is what happened to me when I was a kid, this is terrifying, this led to so much trauma, well, the statute of limitations to go after your assailant in court has long passed. And in some states, they have tried to remedy this by saying, we know the expiration date has passed for you to file a lawsuit against the person that did this to you, to file a civil complaint against that person. But we are going to pass a law that says for the next 2-3 years, anyone who was sexually abused as a child, if you want to file a lawsuit against your assailant, you can do it right now, and we will allow it to go forward. Doesn't mean you're going to win anything, but like you at least have the chance. So in Louisiana, at the time, very red legislature, Republican legislature, but at the time they had a Democratic governor, they passed that 3-year window. Louisiana became the 22nd state to allow people to sue their alleged assailants, even if the statute of limitations had otherwise expired. This is the headline in their newspaper. Bravo to Louisiana. Governor removes deadlines. for child sex abuse suits. Like, it was a big deal. And this is from 2021. They passed that 3-year window. It was a way for victims to finally try to get some semblance of justice. Before that law passed, by the way, victims of sexual abuse only had until the age of 28 to sue their attackers. And the sponsor of the bill actually pointed out, and I want to show you this here, if I can pull this up. Yeah. The sponsor of the bill here. No, come back. I do want to find it because I want to show it to you. All right. I won't be able to find it. I think they just locked me out of it. Oh, no, I lied. Here it is. I'll bring it back. There we go. Sponsored by State Representative Jason Hughes, this bill changes a 28-year-old law that gave Louisiana child sex molestation victims until their 28th birthday to initiate litigation. Hughes cited research showing that the average age for child sex abuse victims to come forward and report their ordeals is 52. So, like, yeah, this window was a big deal. If you couldn't file a lawsuit at 28 and now you're 52, like, it's long expired. So this window was a big deal. It was a good thing. Now, there are reasonable criticisms to these windows whenever they've been passed in other states. The main criticism of them is that people who are accused of abusing someone decades ago, they may find it really difficult to mount a defense of what they did. Details are harder to remember if they happened decades ago. I don't know what I had for lunch last week. You know what I mean? What was I doing 30 years ago? Who knows? Witnesses may no longer be around who can testify on your behalf. Or if an organization thinks the statute of limitations has expired, they may destroy otherwise relevant documents. Now, the counterpoint to that is that the burden of proof still exists. Even if it's hard for the alleged attackers to defend themselves, it's equally as hard for the alleged victims to prove that an attack occurred all those years ago. But again, the 3-year window at least gives victims a chance to make their case. That's all. And that's what a guy named Douglas Bienvenu wanted when he filed a lawsuit. Because here's what happened in his situation. Basically, he said years ago that he and several boys, they were kids in the 1970s, they were ages 8 to 14, they were sexually abused, he said, by a Catholic priest. And in 2018, they sued the Diocese of Lafayette and a specific Catholic church over this. Now, the Catholic Church said, you're not allowed to sue. Statute of limitations has expired. The case needs to be tossed out. But while that was going through the system, Louisiana passed this 3-year window. And the church, and so the alleged victims are like, cool, well, now we're suing, so now we can do it. And the church said, well, the new law doesn't apply to us because it violates our constitutional rights, because we no longer have proper recourse to defend ourselves. And this is the battle that went to the Louisiana Supreme Court. And what happened this week is that the Louisiana Supreme Court said that that 3-year window, the law that established that 3-year window for old victims of sexual abuse to file their lawsuits, is unconstitutional. They basically said that by eliminating the statute of limitations, you're making it really hard for the church to defend itself. So screw the victims. And the end result is that the look-back window is no longer in effect, and victims have no way of getting justice again. There is a website called Balls and Strikes that writes about legal issues, and this is the way they framed this decision. As the dissent points out, the majority's treatment of an absolute property right to immunity from civil liability, it elevates that procedural right above other fundamental rights, like, say, not being sexually abused by an adult in a position of public trust. To put that another way, the victim's actual emotional and physical harm is apparently not as important as the theoretical harm done to the church by requiring them to defend themselves decades after the alleged abuse occurred. There was another thing in this article, too, that I appreciated. As a concurring opinion put it, The look-back window creates a quagmire for defendants who will be faced with having to mount a defense after so much time has elapsed. The problem with this reasoning is that plaintiffs find themselves in the same quagmire, but survivors generally only have their own word to go on, while perpetrators and the institutions protecting them circle the wagons. So the end result is that victims are screwed. And Louisiana justices are not alone in saying this 3-year window is unconstitutional. Courts in Utah and Colorado have done the same thing. It's a reminder that the legal system is not always a savior for the most vulnerable people in society, that the rules are often written to protect the mighty. But I would also say similar laws have been upheld in about 24 states. There is a group called the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, SNAP. This is what they said in response to this decision. The Louisiana Supreme Court overturned a law passed by a unanimous legislature and signed by then Governor John Bell Edwards, who was supported by then Attorney General and current Governor Jeff Landry. All of these Louisiana officials viewed the window as constitutional. The will of the people of the state was thwarted by 4 men. We wonder if their actions might be considered exceptional circumstances that would allow for their removal or impeachment. And they also added the majority opinion written by Judge Genovese said reviving old sexual abuse claims violated the due process rights of accused abusers and their enablers. And they say right here, it seems sad to us that there does not seem to have been any discussion of whether or not the Constitution might also value the lives of innocent Louisiana children over due process. The justices never say what the victims ought to do decades later if filing a lawsuit now is not an option. That's probably because there is no recourse. They're just supposed to live with the trauma, I guess. By prioritizing legal theory over the impact of their decisions, the majority made it clear that abusive Catholic priests can get away with molesting children as long as those victims cannot process the grief until they're much, much older. It's very disturbing. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'll take any last questions. Otherwise, I'll call it a night. I don't think there are any questions. So let me thank Den again for all of his help. I really appreciate it for helping out with the comments. You can support the show and me by going to patreon.com/Hemant. And of course, if you're here and you're watching any of this on YouTube, please subscribe, like, share, whatever it is people do on YouTube these days. Thank you so much. I'll see you again next week. Have a good one, everybody.